Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They came with clipboards and smiles calling it community beautification. But on this land, legacy runs deeper than concrete. When an entitled HOA tried to claim a Texas rancher's pasture, they didn't just trespass, they triggered a legal trap years in the making, and he was ready. I always say, trust the land, but never trust the people circling it. My family's been farming these 800 acres outside of Temple, Texas for 3 generations, and the land's always been honest with us. Hard, stubborn, and patient. I can't say the same for the HOA that sprouted like a weed a couple miles east. It was the night before we left for Colorado, a rare vacation with my wife and daughter, something we hadn't done since my father passed. I had just finished loading up the SUV when the mailman stopped by. Among the usual coupons and farm supply catalogs was a crisp envelope from Silver Creek Horizon HOA. Real thick paper, self-important typeface. That alone made my neck itch. Inside was a formal notice. Scheduled landscape assessment for Eastern Slope. Parcel survey notification. They claimed they were conducting a vegetative study of unincorporated adjacent terrain and intended to walk the area bordering the planned Phase 3 community trail system. My stomach tightened. That so-called adjacent terrain was my southern pasture, including the slope down to the creek, part of my dad's prized hayfield. I didn't reply with a phone call. I don't do that. I sent a notarized cease and desist letter, 2 pages double-spaced, citing the exact property lines and Texas Penal Code 3005 on trespassing. Sent it certified mail and also uploaded it to the county's records portal. They couldn't say they didn't know. But still, I didn't like it. Something in the wording, the casual tone of entitlement, like they thought my land was some vague gray zone they could just step into with hiking boots and city maps. Now, I wasn't going to cancel the trip. We needed this. But I also don't walk away from a fence line without securing it. That same night, I activated a secondary security protocol I'd built over the last year. After an incident with a pipeline company trying to assess my back pasture, I'd worked with a good real estate attorney to establish a standing access restriction on several zones of the farm. We filed it with the county clerk, a legal land status modifier tied to a custom perimeter alert system. Anyone entering the eastern field without my written consent would be triggering an automatic report to both me and the local prosecutor. Essentially, I'd turn that part of the farm into a no-go zone. Legally speaking, a protected area with enforceable consequences. Before we left, I walked that section of the field one last time. The frost had lifted, and the grass was soft under my boots. I checked the motion sensors, powered up the backup solar units, and mounted a new micro camera by the gate facing east. I also dropped a new GPS ping marker in the system. If anything crossed that line, I'd know, even from the Rocky Mountains. My wife teased me for double-checking everything, said I was more paranoid than the cattle dog. Maybe I was. But in this state, your land is your legacy. And anyone trying to take it doesn't usually knock first. So we left at dawn, my daughter asleep in the back, my wife sipping coffee. I tried to enjoy the drive, tried to let go. I told myself, maybe it's just HOA puffery. Maybe they got carried away, thinking they could influence zoning. But even then, I didn't believe it. That HOA, and that smug woman running it, Karen Morrow, had been circling my fence line like vultures ever since their fancy subdivision hit Phase 2. They'd paved sidewalks that stopped just 50 feet from my boundary and installed benches pointed at my creek like it was already part of their brochure. This wasn't over. It was just quiet. For now. The mountains were supposed to quiet my mind. That's why we picked Colorado. My daughter had always wanted to see snow. I'd rented us a cabin near Estes Park, full view of the peaks, wood-burning stove, no cell service unless you hiked half a mile uphill. Perfect place to disconnect. Or so I thought. By the 3rd day, I'd started to relax. My wife made pancakes that morning, and I was halfway through my coffee when the satellite message hit my backup alert phone. It was short, sterile, and cold as hell. Perimeter alert triggered, Zone 3E, vehicle ID, box truck, camera feed available. I stared at the screen. Eastern Slope, the zone I'd locked down, the one near the creek. My pulse kicked. I excused myself, walked out onto the deck, and sat on the railing with my back to the door. Opened the live feed. The first image came from the camera I'd mounted high on the post by the old mesquite. A white box truck had rolled up through the eastern entrance, a dirt access lane no one but me used. Behind it was a dark SUV, shiny and new, creeping forward like it was entitled to be there. My software had picked up 5 heat signatures. Human. One of them was walking with a clipboard. 2 more were unloading orange stakes and bright survey flags. The 4th camera caught the moment I knew it was exactly what I feared. Karen Morrow, HOA president of Silver Creek Horizon, standing on my damn land in khakis and a branded windbreaker, hands on her hips, surveying my pasture like she'd just purchased it at auction. She pointed at the creek bank, spoke to one of the men, and they began hammering stakes into the ground. A big green and white banner was unrolled and zipped to 2 poles they'd hammered in, right where my cattle used to graze in spring. It read, "Future home of Silver Creek Trail, restoring access to nature." I could feel the heat rising behind my ears, not from shock, from certainty. I knew it. I damn well knew it. Karen had made her move. I tapped the screen and began pulling archived footage. The cameras had been recording since motion was detected. They'd been out there for over 20 minutes. The truck still hadn't moved. Its ramp was down, and a man in a reflective vest was unloading gravel sacks. Were they planning to lay trail foundation? Then came the kicker, a drone launched from the back of the SUV, buzzing up into the sky like a giant mosquito. Its camera blinked red as it captured overhead shots of their work zone. A man with a gimbal was recording Karen as she spoke in that smug, staged tone of hers. "We're thrilled to begin Phase 1 of our community green space restoration. This land has been ignored for years, and we're proud to return it to the people who truly appreciate it. To the people who appreciate it? That land had been in my family since before their subdivision even had plumbing. That creek was where my grandfather watered his horses. And now she thought slapping up a sign made it hers? I didn't throw my phone, but God knows I wanted to. Instead, I opened the private legal dashboard linked to my system. The moment a perimeter breach occurred in Zone 3E, and especially if it involved any modifications or construction, it triggered a predefined sequence. Within 60 seconds of the first stake being driven, the system had already submitted a full video packet to the Bell County District Attorney's Office, a flagged report to my legal firm, auto-forwarded with GPS data, a ping to the local sheriff's department labeled "Active Trespass on Restricted Parcel, Civil and Criminal Violations Possible." There was also one more thing, an internal alert to me, prompting remote review. I double-checked everything. The legal overlay I had filed with the county, active and binding. The notices acknowledged and digitally recorded. The parcel registered under my name and held in trust. No room for misinterpretation. But Karen? She wasn't misinterpreting anything. She was gambling. She thought I was out of state and wouldn't notice that by the time I returned, there'd be benches, mulch, a gravel path, and smiling HOA families already walking their dogs next to my creek. They'd claim community investment, say the land had been converted, and try to shame me for reclaiming it. I'd seen this play before. She wasn't just trespassing, she was building a narrative. I stepped back inside and calmly told my wife there was an issue back home. She didn't ask much. She saw my face and knew. I explained I wouldn't cut the trip short, not yet. I had people watching things, and more importantly, the trap was working. My attorney, Sarah Blake, called within the hour. She'd already gotten the video and had submitted an emergency application for judicial review. Karen was on private land that had an active entry restriction filed with the county. The minute they started altering terrain, painting rocks, or digging so much as a post hole, that wasn't civil anymore. That was criminal mischief. And the kicker, the system recorded audio too. Karen's on tape saying this was the beginning of reclaiming this for our residents. Sarah was laughing, but I wasn't. "Get the papers ready," I told her. "I want a restraining order, a cease and desist, and prep for a criminal complaint. And notify the sheriff. I want boots on the ground today." She said she was already on it. As the sun set behind the Rockies that night, I sat by the fireplace in silence. My daughter roasted marshmallows, oblivious, thank God. But I was already writing the battle plan in my head. They made their move. They thought they were clever, quick, and justified. They didn't realize they'd just triggered something I'd built piece by piece, clause by clause, line by legal line. And now it was already too late for them to back out. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was unsure, hell no, because I was waiting for the first domino to fall. And at 5:23 a.m. Mountain Time, my phone lit up with a Sheriff's Department email marked Priority Confirmed Response. They'd received the video package, reviewed the boundary records, and sent a unit to verify the site. The deputies found Karen and her crew still out there. Apparently, they'd brought folding chairs, boxed lunches, and even a Bluetooth speaker which blared classical music into the canyon like it was some damn vineyard picnic. But it got better. Karen, being Karen, decided to give the deputies a walking tour. She claimed she was in talks with the County Parks Division and that this land was in limbo, and she was simply asserting stewardship. She handed over a map. Not mine, not county certified, but a glossy brochure-style rendering with curved paths, little icons for benches, even a dog park area labeled Creekside Wolf Zone. They confiscated it. An hour later, Sarah called me from the courthouse in Belton. She was there with Judge Hernandez, who, after reviewing the video evidence, issued a preliminary criminal trespass order, along with a conditional arrest warrant for Karen Morrow. "I've never seen a judge roll his eyes that hard," Sarah said. She also told me the map Karen handed the deputies was traced back to a local architectural firm. Karen had provided them with GIS data, which turned out to be heavily doctored. The parcel she claimed to own didn't match any public record. She'd cut and pasted pieces from zoning maps, clipped away my registered parcel ID, and tried to rename the field as East Creek Buffer Zone. Fraudulent mapping. That's a felony. That's when I booked a return flight. But by the time we landed in Dallas that evening, things had already moved fast. Deputy Calhoun from the Bell County Sheriff's Office called as I walked off the jet bridge. His voice was calm, dry, and just southern enough to make it sting. "Mr. Crane, just letting you know we took your trespasser into custody about 40 minutes ago. She was on site, standing by that creek, waving some folder around and making quite a fuss." "Did she resist?" I asked. "Verbally, real indignant type. Claimed we didn't have jurisdiction over HOA-administered lands. When I told her she was standing on restricted private property, she started shouting something about community good and historic use. Then she refused to hand over her ID. And we arrested her, peacefully. Got it all on body cam. They had also impounded the box truck. Inside, deputies found landscaping tools, limestone gravel, a partially assembled archway that said Silver Creek Welcome Trail, and a clipboard with a hand-sketched phasing plan. All of it labeled with HOA logos. The driver claimed he'd been told it was an HOA-endorsed expansion on easement land. The kicker? Karen had also printed mock-up signs with the HOA logo and county seal, a direct violation of Texas Penal Code, Paragraph 37.11, impersonating a public servant or agency. That added another charge. The media caught wind before I even got home. One of the deputies apparently tipped off a local paper. By the time I pulled into my driveway just past midnight, my inbox was full of interview requests. But I didn't care about that. I wanted to see it for myself. The next morning, I walked out to the east pasture. It was quiet. Cold air still clung to the slope. The stakes were still in the ground, a few flags flapping half-heartedly in the wind. The banner had been ripped down, likely during the arrest. I walked over to the place where Karen had been standing. The little flat near the creek, where the arch was supposed to go. I stood there, breathing slow, the frost crunching under my boots. This was where she'd drawn her imaginary line. This was where she thought the law stopped. But the thing is, I am the law. Or close enough. And she'd picked the wrong man's land to stage a fantasy. I could hear the gravel crunching up the road. Sheriff Langston himself pulled up, rolled down his window. "Thought you might want the paperwork in person," he said, handing me a thick folder. Inside was the full incident report, an inventory list of seized property, a copy of the warrant, and a formal acknowledgement from the DA's office. "She's being processed now. Magistrate court in the morning." "What's she saying?" "Mostly screaming. Something about a constitutional right to beautification." We both snorted. "She'll be out on bond," he added, "but the charges are real. And that forged mapping nonsense? That's gonna stick. DA's already reviewing her emails." I thanked him, took the folder, and turned back toward my house. The sun was rising over the fields. Even with the stakes and footprints, the land still looked clean, unbroken. Not for long. I was just getting started. Karen spent less than 48 hours in county before someone posted her bail. I wasn't surprised. These HOA types stick together when one of their own gets dragged through the mud, especially when that one is their queen bee. It was a warm Thursday morning when I got the first sign of what was coming. I was walking the north fence with my ranch hand, Travis, checking for storm damage, when he squinted toward the road and muttered, "You've got company." Two shiny SUVs had pulled up just outside the fence line, not on my land, but close enough to make a point. A woman in heels and a sleeveless puffer vest stepped out and started snapping photos of my gate. Another man followed, carrying a tripod and what looked like a drone case. They didn't wave, they didn't speak, they just documented. Within an hour, I had a Google alert on my name. HOA members had started pushing a story online. Local farmer detains community leader over park access dispute. One blog claimed I'd abused a legal loophole to deny nature access to nearby residents. Another accused me of using legacy land ownership to weaponize the courts. Weaponize. They think I'm the one with the agenda. The HOA's board, or what was left of it, released a statement calling Karen's arrest an outrageous overreach, claiming she had been acting on behalf of community interests. They announced they were exploring legal remedies to reclaim access to and historical footpaths and buffer lands adjacent to the Silver Creek community. Historical footpaths. That was rich. My great-grandfather had carved that trail with a mule and a fence post digger in 1929. The only history there was our family's sweat. Then came the letter. A courier dropped it off at my porch in a black envelope with a stamped seal. It was a formal demand for mediation signed by the HOA's new interim attorney, someone named Keith Delaney. They alleged that the area in question had become functionally integrated with HOA property through long-term proximity, and that my recent legal filings constituted a malicious obstruction of public benefit. They also requested I immediately restore all disturbed infrastructure, including flag posts, signage anchors, and trailhead material. I stood there on my porch, reading that line again. They wanted me to restore the crap they illegally dumped on my land. I didn't respond, not with words. Instead, I had Sarah file a civil counterclaim for land tampering, intentional trespass, and attempted real estate fraud. We included a motion to subpoena HOA board emails and internal memos. Anything that could show premeditated encroachment. Within 48 hours, we had a response, not from the HOA, from the architectural firm Karen had hired. Turns out, they wanted to get ahead of this. Their legal counsel sent us a full copy of the project brief Karen submitted, including the fake parcel maps, doctored zoning overlays, and an email thread where Karen stated in writing that Mr. Crane is on vacation and won't be aware of minor landscaping adjustments until well after Phase 1 concludes. There it was. Intent, malice, fraud. We forwarded the packet to the district attorney. Meanwhile, Karen didn't stay quiet. She gave an interview to a local news station, standing in front of a blooming magnolia tree in her yard, wearing pearls and clutching a printed binder of court documents. This is about community. This is about healing. That man owns more land than he can manage, and he's using fear and litigation to scare good people into submission. She even got misty-eyed when she talked about the children who just wanted to walk by a creek. I nearly threw my remote through the TV. But I didn't. I waited, because her house of cards was shaking. And I had more. Two of her hired contractors reached out through my attorney. They wanted to cooperate. One of them had audio recordings of Karen promising full HOA backing and claiming she'd spoken to a county official who had assured her the land wasn't being watched. We checked that county official. Turns out he was a junior permit clerk who'd never even left his desk, much less verified a land title. We deposed him. He was terrified. Said Karen made it sound like she already had approval and just needed paperwork to catch up. So we filed another motion, this one to formally include attempted manipulation of county records in the criminal case, and the judge approved it. Back at the ranch, I made a few changes too. I installed a new steel gate at the eastern boundary just beyond the slope, welded, bolted with a motion-triggered floodlight and a sign that read, "Private property, trespassers prosecuted, no exceptions." And I added another line beneath it, "This land watches back." We weren't just defending the farm anymore. We were drawing a hard legal line through every lie she'd spun, every flag she planted, and every ounce of HOA arrogance she thought would shield her. Let them come. The court date was approaching, and I wasn't the one bluffing. The thing about liars is they get loud when they start to drown, and Karen was drowning fast. Within a week of our latest filings, the Bell County prosecutor opened a formal investigation into document fraud. The centerpiece was that architectural packet Karen had handed over, the one full of cheerful walking paths and picnic tables drawn on top of my deeded land. Combined with the contractor's testimony and her emails, it painted a picture too perfect to ignore. Sarah and I met with the lead investigator, a sharp former FBI agent named Diane Holloway. She didn't waste time. We're looking at 4 felony counts: fraudulent land claims, tampering with public records, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and impersonation of county authority. She flipped through a binder full of printed emails, flagged quotes, and enlarged map overlays. If half of this holds up, she's cooked. But it wasn't just Karen. That's when Diane showed us the big surprise. Several emails CC'd other members of the HOA board. Not just CC'd, replied, approved, commented. Turns out Karen hadn't been acting alone. She'd pitched the Land Beautification Initiative as a way to raise property values and market the neighborhood as eco-integrated. One member had written, "If this is successful, we can present it during the regional HOA convention. Imagine the grants." Another suggested they install symbolic boundary pillars to psychologically reinforce territorial understanding. Translation: steal land, make it feel inevitable. We submitted a motion to the civil court to freeze HOA assets pending further investigation. The judge approved. That meant they couldn't tap their emergency legal fund, which suddenly made their tone change. 3 board members resigned within 2 days. Karen, meanwhile, tried to go full martyr. She released a public letter addressed to the residents of Silver Creek Horizon, claiming she had been targeted by a politically motivated landowner with a vendetta against community stewardship. She described me as a former prosecutor turned land baron, accused me of orchestrating a media spectacle, and said my cameras were a violation of spirit, if not law. Spirit. Lady, you parked a gravel truck on my property and tried to name the creek. But the real blow came from inside her own camp. Someone leaked HOA meeting minutes to a local paper, unredacted. In them, Karen had openly pitched a proposal to begin symbolic occupation of the slope zone before winter, using what she called a narrative claim model. Her words. She even said, "Control is perception. If we plant the story, we win the land." It was like watching a snake write its own obituary. Sarah filed to include the minutes in both the civil and criminal dockets. The DA's office now had enough to expand the scope of the case. The sheriff's department issued subpoenas for Karen's HOA emails and messaging apps. And still, Karen tried to talk her way out. She hosted a backyard town hall, tried to rally support, but only 9 people showed up. Someone filmed her standing by a string of tiki torches, babbling about restoring harmony, while her own treasurer walked out mid-sentence. Me, I didn't show up. I didn't need to. I spent that night organizing old survey documents, files I hadn't touched in years. One of them was my father's original deed transfer, with hand-marked boundary notes in blue ink. I added a copy to the litigation folder. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every arrogant fool who thought land without a white picket fence was up for grabs. About every HOA that thought a logo and a letterhead gave them dominion over private titles. Back on the property, I installed a motion camera pointed directly at the old trail Karen tried to claim, not because I expected anyone to come back, but because if they did, I wanted their faces in HD. And under that camera, I planted a new sign. It didn't say private property this time. It said, "This land isn't forgotten. It's waiting." And beneath that, smaller, "Smile for the prosecutor." The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor wax, same as it always had since I first clerked there right out of law school. Only this time, I wasn't sitting behind the prosecutor's desk. I was in the front row, watching the walls close in on Karen Morrow. She came in wearing cream-colored slacks and a blazer 2 sizes too big, probably to make her look smaller, less threatening. Her lawyer, some slick guy out of Austin named Richter, carried 3 briefcases and the air of a man who thought country courtrooms were beneath him. Didn't help. The judge wasn't impressed. Neither was the jury. The state opened with the simplest charge, trespassing. They played the footage straight from my perimeter cams. High-res, time-stamped, full color. Karen stepping through the gate. Karen waving her arms at a hired crew. Karen planting a stake in the soil, pointing like she was Napoleon. The jury watched in silence. Then came the contracts. The prosecutors showed emails between Karen and the landscape contractors. invoices signed under the HOA's name for work to commence on reclaimed buffer zone. They highlighted her words. This land will be listed as HOA maintained by month's end. Push forward. Richter objected, said she'd been misled by ambiguous maps, claimed she believed the land was in process of reclassification. Then Sarah stepped up. She handed over the firm's original map, the one from the surveyors who'd worked with my grandfather, overlaid with the fake one Karen had used. The differences weren't just mistakes. They were surgical. Parcel numbers deleted, borders erased, streams renamed. She didn't misread the boundary, Sarah said to the jury. She deleted it. That hit hard. Then came the contractor, Pete Morales, one of the first people Karen sent onto my land. He took the stand and swore under oath that she had assured him the land was abandoned, that the owner was uninvolved, and that she had temporary jurisdiction for land enhancement. The courtroom fell quiet. She told us, he said, if anyone asked, say we were volunteers, that the permits were being finalized. Even Richter looked rattled. By the end of the day, the judge approved the prosecution's motion to expand the charges: attempted land fraud, forgery, and misrepresentation of public agency authority. The next day, Karen took the stand. It was a disaster. She tried to appear dignified, talked about her vision for the neighborhood, about connecting people to natural spaces. She said my land had been left idle, and that it was only logical someone take responsibility for it. Then Sarah asked a single question. Did you believe you had the legal right to that land? Karen hesitated, long enough for everyone to notice, then said, I believed I had a moral right. Wrong answer. From that moment, she lost the jury. You could see it in their faces, their mouths set in tight lines, their arms crossed. Texans don't take kindly to people talking about morals when they're caught trespassing. It got worse. The prosecutor introduced new evidence, a thumb drive containing audio from a board meeting Karen never thought was recorded. In it, she described the East Field as a dead zone and referred to me as a paranoid rancher with too much land and not enough use. She also said, we act now. We control perception. He'll be back too late to stop it. That was it. The moment of no return. When the judge called recess, Richter didn't look at her. Karen sat frozen, hands folded tight, staring at the courtroom wall like it might crack open and swallow her whole. But the real moment, the one I'll never forget, came the next morning. We arrived early, courthouse quiet except for the hum of vending machines. As I sat in the hallway, a man in a pressed shirt and nervous expression sat next to me. You're Mr. Crane? I nodded. My name's Denny. I'm Karen's nephew. She had me handle some of the HOA web files. I found something I think you ought to see. He handed over a printed document, a proposal Karen had written under a pseudonym, K. Monroe, outlining a 5-phase expansion plan for the HOA that explicitly mentioned my creek as a community asset target. It was dated 3 months before the alleged accidental overstep. He gave a sworn affidavit that same day. By the end of the week, the courtroom felt more like a funeral. Karen's lawyer asked for a plea deal. Too late. The DA wanted a conviction, and they got one. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. But even before that, the fallout started. The HOA board officially suspended operations. The county froze their accounts pending civil penalties. Their insurer filed breach of ethics claims. And the local paper ran a front-page photo of Karen, eyes hollow, with the headline, From President to Felon. Silver Creek Scandal Explodes in Court. Back home, I finally removed the motion camera. Not because I stopped watching, but because now everyone else was. You could feel it the moment the verdict hit the air, like a tension that finally snapped. Silver Creek Horizon, the pristine HOA that once handed out warnings for grass height and mailbox paint, collapsed in on itself faster than anyone expected. Within 72 hours of the conviction, their office door was padlocked by county order. The sheriff personally delivered a cease operations notice. Their community website went down the same afternoon, replaced by a single message in red text, pending restructuring due to ongoing litigation. Restructuring. Try total meltdown. Residents started flooding the county clerk's office, demanding clarity. Turns out no one had ever really asked to see the HOA's foundational documents. They'd just trusted the board. But now, with Karen's signature on half a dozen forged annexation drafts, everything came under review. The county launched a full audit. Sarah and I were invited to a closed session meeting with the county attorney's office and a state-level real estate ethics panel. They laid out what they'd found. Not only had Karen tried to misappropriate my land, she had also illegally collected fees for maintenance on parcels that weren't hers to touch, including 3 homes built near the edge of my property line. One of those homeowners, a retired school teacher named Judith, had been paying HOA dues for 7 years under the impression her house was within their jurisdiction. It wasn't, not even close. Now she, along with 14 others, had joined a class action suit against the HOA for fraud, coercion, and misrepresentation. Sarah offered to assist with document review. I offered them access to my surveillance archive. Then came the federal fine. A joint investigation between the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Texas Real Estate Commission slapped the HOA with a $1.2 million civil penalty for systemic misuse of authority, deceptive land practices, and public endangerment. Public endangerment? Apparently, one of Karen's planned trail development areas crossed into a protected wildlife zone without permits. A biologist from the county testified that her crew had disrupted a nesting area for great horned owls during their landscaping activity. She hadn't just lied, she'd done damage. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, my gate had become something of a local landmark. People started driving out just to see the signs. One guy, a podcast host from Austin, asked if he could film an episode in front of my "Smile for the Prosecutor" placard. I said no. This wasn't a tourist attraction, but it was a lesson. I got letters, emails. A dozen ranchers and landowners from across the state reached out, asking how I'd set up my protections, what I'd registered, how they could do the same. So I did something I never thought I would. I wrote a guide. Short, practical, titled "The Fence You Can't See: Legal Defense for Private Landowners." I didn't charge a dime. The real reward came 3 weeks after the verdict, when I attended a town forum hosted by the local commissioner's office. I didn't plan to speak, but after 3 other property owners cited my case as their reason for fortifying their deeds, the moderator called me up. I kept it short. This land belonged to my father and his father. It's not about fences or surveys. It's about knowing the lines that matter and never letting someone talk you out of them just because they sound polite. I didn't need applause, but I got it anyway. Karen, meanwhile, had disappeared from the neighborhood. Her home, a 2-story with white shutters and a wrought iron mailbox, sat dark. Word was the bank had started foreclosure after the HOA stopped covering her liability bond. Her name was stripped from the neighborhood welcome sign. The new interim board, all 3 of them, issued a formal apology letter to me and the other affected landowners. It was signed with regret and respect and came with a stamped notarized statement relinquishing any future claim to bordering land parcels. Sarah framed mine and hung it beside the fireplace. And just to be sure no one got any ideas, I installed one final line of protection, a permanent steel post at each corner of the disputed slope, engraved with parcel coordinates and state-certified boundary markers. Not because I expected a new Karen, but because I wanted the next one to know she'd never get past the first step. I didn't go to the sentencing to gloat. I went because some things deserve to be seen through. The courtroom was colder than usual. Either the AC was high or nerves were running low. Karen Morrow sat at the defense table, no longer wearing her HOA blazer or pastel lipstick. Just a gray suit that looked borrowed, and a face that had lost its angles. She didn't speak when the judge entered. She didn't look at me either. The DA made his final statement, calmly walking through every charge: trespassing, fraud, tampering with official records, criminal impersonation, attempted land seizure, and abuse of public trust in a regulated housing authority. Then Karen's lawyer, now visibly thinner and less cocky than a month ago, asked the court for leniency. He cited her age, her previously clean record, and a misguided desire to serve her community. The judge didn't buy it. This court finds the defendant guilty on all counts. Given the calculated nature of the crimes, the scope of impact, and the defendant's total lack of remorse, I sentence Karen Morrow to 7 years in state prison. He paused. Effective immediately. That was it. No dramatic gasp, no shouting. Just the bailiff stepping forward, the clink of cuffs, and Karen being led away down a side hallway, the same one I'd once seen a cattle rustler vanish through years ago when I still worked here. The same hallway that only has one exit and no gate. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters were waiting. I gave one brief quote, then left. She tried to write her name on something that never belonged to her. Now it's written in a record she can't erase. Back at the ranch, things were quiet again. The fall rains came early, softening the fields and swelling the creek she tried to rename. The trees along the slope thickened where her crews had cleared brush. I planted new grass there, not for show, but because Dad always said pasture never forgets who walked on it. Sarah dropped by more often now. We weren't rushing anything, but it was good having her there. She brought baked goods and court filings in the same bag, and sometimes we sat on the porch and talked about water rights and old tractors like they were equal parts sacred and stupid. The guide I wrote spread further than I thought. A few agriculture co-ops picked it up. I got emails from Montana, Arkansas, even as far as Vermont. One guy sent me a photo. His own no trespassing sign next to a laminated copy of the title lock declaration I'd recommended. Inspired by the Crane method, he'd written. Hell, I didn't ask for a name on anything. I just didn't want another Karen kicking over someone's fence and calling it landscaping. A month after sentencing, the county commissioner invited me to speak at a statewide summit on property protection and HOAs. I told them no at first. Then I remembered that my father used to say, if you don't speak at the table, someone else tells your story. So I went. I wore boots and a clean shirt. I told the truth. I didn't embellish. I didn't trash talk. You can't stop people from being entitled, I said, but you can sure as hell make sure they get the right answer when they test the law. And maybe that was all this had been. A long, expensive, ugly test, one that ended the way it needed to. Now, when I walk that eastern slope, I do it with calm, not because nothing will ever happen again, but because I know what I've built, in law, in land, in memory, is stronger than the next Karen who might come sniffing around with a clipboard and a complex. The land remembers, and so do I.